Canadian MP Kevin Yong joins us at this point. Kevin, thank you very much for speaking with us here at CNN News 18. Has Mr. Justin Trudeau been able to prove or provide any credible evidence after he made that announcement in Parliament that he had credible allegations against India?
So to date, nothing has been laid in terms of charges. I think one of the things that is very important, and I'm going to continue to advocate for, whether it is the Prime Minister or Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, politicians need to stop politicizing what is a very serious situation. Being a political leader does not make you judge, jury, and executioner. If there is credible evidence, leave it to the appropriate authorities to be able to lay any charges if that's warranted. And right now, this continued whisper and innuendo campaign is doing a disservice to both of our countries. It's hurting the relationship between two democracies where rule of law should be a priority. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now.
In your wisdom, why would a Prime Minister of a nation say what he said and act like he's acting?
I'm not going to presume what the Prime Minister is thinking, but I think it is no secret that both the Liberals and the NDP count on the Sikh community in British Columbia in particular for about 12 seats. I hope that's not the case. I hope that they are not putting party before country and party before the important relationship between our two countries, because there are certain things that should matter more than politics. That is, for democratic countries like Canada and India, rule of law, justice. We can't try to put out all of these whispers and innuendos without bringing forward the evidence. And I think a lot of people are asking, and I am asking, where's the evidence? Why haven't charges been laid?
These entities, Kevin, they are actually making a secessionist demand. They are actually challenging the sovereignty of Bharat. The other aspect is there is no demand within the Sikh community in India. Indians don't want to do anything like this. It's Canadian citizens who are advocating the balkanization of another sovereign nation.
So I think in Canada, I mean, everyone is protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That includes freedom of speech, freedom of association, and so on. But there are reasonable limits to that. That includes you can't use freedom of speech to advocate for violence or hate. And one of the things that I have found very challenging about people who have been sympathetic to the Khalistani movement here in Canada is they've abused freedom of speech to put out these really alarming posters that have targeted India's High Commissioner in Canada, someone who I've gotten to know very well, who is, I think, an esteemed, individual.
This is Indian diplomats and Indian envoys, but Canadian citizens are being brutally abused and threatened with rape and murder for standing up to these secessionists. Now, where is the Trudeau administration coming in there? The other aspect is that do you believe that the Trudeau administration, along with their allies, are broad brushing all of the Canadian Sikhs as those backing secessionist movement? Because we are given to understand this is a very small number. So even for a vote bank, are you broad brushing the entire Canadian Sikh community as wanting the secession or the balkanization of another country?
I think you bring up an important point. The Sikh community is not a monolith. I think a good kind of parallel example that I can provide, particularly within the context of foreign interference, is Canada has been facing a lot of challenges and allegations around foreign interference from the Chinese Communist Party. I am of Chinese heritage. Just because I am Chinese or anyone is of Chinese heritage doesn't mean they automatically support the Chinese Communist Party. Those are two very distinct groups, two very different people, and I think that's similarly the case for the Sikh community. People come to Canada for a number of different reasons. Being the son of immigrants, actually, my parents were refugees. They came to Canada wanting to seek to build a better life for them and their kids. And I think that's really what the majority of people want.
See, some aspects, Operation Fox Hunt, as allegedly being run by the CCP on Canadian turf, has Justin Trudeau spoken about it in Parliament? Karima Baloch, a Baloch activist who was murdered in 2020. ISI activities or Pakistani activities on Canadian soil. Has Justin Trudeau spoken about it? He's decided to take the position against someone who has a red corner notice against him, an Interpol red corner notice against him since November 2014, and somebody against whom letter rogatories, extradition requests have been submitted during his term as Prime Minister, in his first term, by India. Also, he's another entity, Nijar, who was murdered. He was somebody who was proscribed a terrorist by the Indian government in 2020. Now, I'm sure these facts are not something which you're not aware of. But given all of this, me sitting here in India is compelled to ask, why would Justin Trudeau do what he did?
So that's a fair question. Let me just say first and foremost, a Canadian citizen was murdered, and that is a criminal act, and that needs to be investigated. And any evidence that the authorities might have need to be prosecuted in a court of law. Okay, so whoever that might be, that is what needs to be done, because Canada is a country where rule of law prevails, and it must continue to be the case. Now, you raise some very important questions that a lot of us are asking here, frankly, in the House of Commons of Canada. Why has it that the Prime Minister has been willing to step forward and bring forward what he has described as, quote, credible allegations in the most public forum available in the House of Commons for one country, and yet not done the same for an overwhelming volume of allegations as it relates to foreign interference from the Chinese Communist Party? Why has there been two such distinct approaches for two countries? And I think that's something that is up to the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada to be able to answer. Because if we truly are a country of rule of law, then evidence needs to be brought forward, and charges need to be laid if they're substantiated, and it needs to be prosecuted in a court of law. We have to stop this whisper and innuendo campaign, and we can't delay any further, because justice delayed is justice denied.
Very fair point, because Riput Ahmed Malik died, no investigation, there's no murder. I'm given to understand, even in the case of Nijar, is there a charge sheet? Have the cops given out a list of suspects? Is there even a case in court 5 months down the line? These are aspects. But within the Liberals, is there dissonance with the way Justin Trudeau is conducting himself? Do you see a change? Are his days as Prime Minister numbered? Elections are still about 2 years away. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation out there. I've spoken to colleagues who are in the Liberal Party, who are one member who is of Hindu heritage. I know he has been an outspoken member in terms of speaking out against some of the violence that you spoke about earlier. I think what's very key for me is that, some very serious allegations have been made. It is vital now that that evidence be taken to the appropriate authorities so that charges can be delayed. We can't delay justice any further. And it makes me think a lot about the tragedy of Air India, where it took 20 years for even piecemeal justice. Even though I think a lot of discussion around who the culprits was already out there, right? And it hurts me just to think about what the families of those victims had to go through, and Canada cannot allow that to continue. We cannot repeat the same mistake that we did with Air India, and this is such an important relationship between two democracies during a time when authoritarian has been on the rise, that we owe it to not just the important ties between Canada and India, the deep and long familial ties, to ensure that we continue to carry forward that torch of justice, and that we find justice for any citizens who might be murdered, but also that we protect the rule of law.
The Indian government has been very clear. If you have evidence, give it to us. We'll help you catch these people. If you believe that there is an Indian element in this entire aspect, but there's been nothing forthcoming. But now the government of India has also given a date of 10th of October for Canada to recall 40 of its diplomats who are currently operating on Indian soil. Has Mr. Trudeau been questioned on his foreign policy, on the impact that this would have? What's your
So,
thoughts?
yeah, so Nan, I will say that, my understanding is those 41 diplomats would represent about half of our High Commission to India. That is a very significant number. And I understand why emotions and feelings might be running high because very serious allegations have been made. Personally, I would advocate for hopefully calmer minds to be able to prevail and for us to remember that Canada and India have a deep, long history and relationship, and I hope that we can find a way to be able to move forward, because I think if we really took a step back, we would find that Canada and India share more than we have different, and I hope that